right, welcome back to another episode of the Positive Persistence Podcast, where we bring you stories to inspire you and tips and techniques to help you tap into your potential. I'm your host, Ian Bowen, and today I'm joined with the founder of Juggernaut Consultants, Nate Green. Nate is an award-winning CEO, founder, entrepreneur, and best-selling author. His relentless spirit and grit, coupled with his passion to impact the lives of those that are hungry and driven, have been a combination that have provided him great success. Through a life of crazy adventures, major hardships, and a constant need to adapt, Nate has constantly pushed forward to develop the core of who he is and overcome all obstacles he encounters. The life transition from a police officer to founder and CEO of a company that he later sold for 8 figures has allowed for financial freedom and a unique knowledge base that he has channeled to launch others towards success. Nate is passionate and dedicated to constant growth, development, and building a legacy focused on changing the lives of others. Through this process, he's written his first book, Suck Less, Do Better, which I have right here, awesome read, and has developed the programs Focus Your Greatest Asset and Out of the Suck. Nate, welcome to the show. It is an honor to have you here.
Thanks, Ian, man. I appreciate you having me here, and I'm excited about our conversation and what this will do to the listeners.
Yes, absolutely. I'm super excited to introduce you to our listeners and our viewers and let them know about who Nate Green is. Nate and I met through a coaching group maybe about six weeks ago-ish. And Nate has helped me on my journey already and reading his book. And the great thing about this book, which I'll kind of touch on now, but then we'll get into your story a little bit. But this book is actionable. And what Nate does is not only does he give you the tips and tools and techniques in terms of information, but he also gives you worksheets to work through the processes that he teaches you in the book. So it's not just a bunch of words of do this, do that, do this, do that. And then you're kind of like, well, all right, that's great information. Now, what am I supposed to do? He actually gives you actionable items and worksheets to work through so you can work through the process of what he's teaching you, which I think is genius and super hands-on. And I love that about this book. So Nate, the book is awesome. We could go on. I could go on talking about the book for hours, but I want our viewers and our listeners to get to know you and what led up to you writing this book, and the life lessons that you have in here. Let's kind of talk about those because it's a super interesting story. So I'll kind of just hand it over to you, and if you can kind of start off and kind of help us understand how Nate Green came to be who he is today.
Man, Ian, that's a lot, and I'm excited about it. I love the fact that the book is having an impact with you. Yes, I knew that in writing the book, we weren't just being dedicated, and I wasn't being dedicated to just write a book. We have to provide resources, and that's where the resource page, it's some downloads, some videos. I also wanted people to get a feel for who I was. That was a big important thing about having the videos inside the resource page. That way, people could get more of the feel of just the personality, and that's what I love about these podcasts, is just providing an impact while people get to know a little bit about that flair, a little bit of the difference that I bring to the table. I'm a little bit unorthodox at times, and that's what I love having a part of it. So where did Nate Green come from besides my mom? In this process, right. My journey has been a little bit crazy. I walk through, and in the book, I talk a little bit about my childhood, some difficulties I had with my older brother. I went deep into that in the book. But realistically, starting my life in this setting here is being a police officer. Now, when I was a cop at 19 to 23, man, talk about some PTSD, some difficult things that you have to work through to really juggle in. I got the nickname Dr. Death in my first phase of business, or first phase of law enforcement, which was not my favorite way of getting it. Seeing way too many dead bodies. At 19-year-old, you're like, wait a second. Oh, there's another one.
Yeah,
there's another one.
That's that one's intense.
Yeah, that one's missing body parts, like trying to walk through and go through that. And luckily got an updated nickname, Rook Nasty, as we've discussed before, by working through that journey. So it was it was great. I loved being a cop, but I knew I was built for something different. And God put this passion inside of me of always kind of trying to understand and discover more about myself. And so through that process, while I was a cop running on the roads, taking names and beating people up and taking them to jail, like I love that. But there was always this inkling. And so I started unwinding more about myself, and I started walking through the process and trying to discover more. And luckily God had prompted me to do that, because in the process I had heart failure at 23 after being paralyzed from the waist down for about 3.5 months, with doctors unsure of that next process. That's why me and you connect really well. You have some history of
Hmm.
medical problems and
Yeah.
resilience coming through that, and that's where that relatability is awesome. And then in that process, man, like having the hope, knowing I was built for something different, knowing that I'd already worked through this process, made it where I could work through this conversion in my life, this entire right turn. And people are always like, Nate, how'd you go from a cop to where you're at now? And how did you survive that transition? Because it was brutal. It was a brutal process. And in there was a lot of unsurety. There was a lot of times where it was like, man, like how am I gonna make this turn? And through just complete resilience, by having more of an understanding of who I am and what I'm built for, gave me the ability to not only turn, but turn and find a greater success than I had found before. And so in there, that's why the book is so important, is it breaks down different segments of my life on
Hmm.
what makes me me. And
Right.
then running through business and chasing after just this always, the suck less, do better mentality. It's a book title now, but it's only a book title because I've been living by that phrase for about 15 years. Every single day, trying to become a better version of myself than I was the day before, competing with nobody else but me. And that's what I walked through and lived the last 16 years, is just chasing down this greatest version of who I can become. And that's what I hope to do for the next 30, 40, 50 years,
Yeah.
because I always want to get better.
Nate, where does your intensity, and that's the only word I can think about to describe it, where does your intensity come from? And when did you harness it and embrace it? Because it seems it came at a young age. I mean, before you became a cop, before you were 19 years old, it seems that there was, the intensity was in your DNA, and something was the catalyst, and then it exploded, and then it's just created the juggernaut that you have
Yeah.
been ever since.
So that is a great kind of connection there. So I am a perfect blend of my mom and my dad, and which is really funny because my dad is very driven, very motivated, very intense, as you put it, and just was a great example. Man, I remember every single morning. Didn't matter what time I woke up. I would wake up, and my dad would already be up, learning and developing, whether he's reading the Bible, whether he's going for his doctorate, whether he was going for a second master's degree. Like he was always the example, always the bar. And so when you're looking at that, and when you have a father that is that type of example, it might take some time to click, but then when it does click, it's like, wow, this is what I'm built for. I'm built for more. And when you have a
Hmm.
dad that's constantly showing his example of the suck less, do better mentality, which he didn't call it that, but that constant development, that constant growth,
Yeah.
when you see that day in, day out, it's ingrained in you. And so I'll be honest with you that I've always been like a motivated guy, but it didn't click until after I had the heart failure, after I was paralyzed. Then all of a sudden, one day, it was actually after the doctors told me, the doctors actually thought I had a degenerative issue, and they gave me only approximately 10 years to live. But
Wow.
don't worry, I didn't die after 10 years. Just in case you're wondering, I want to make sure I clarify that for all the
Okay, you
listeners.
passed the threshold. Okay,
I
that's good.
passed the threshold.
Yeah.
But walking through the process, it was something about when they told me, Nate, listen, you're broken. You're broken in a way that's only going to get worse. And one, it lit this
Phew, man.
intensity of like, no, you're wrong. And
Yeah.
I'm going to show you by living for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I'm going to have an impact while I'm here. And it's something about being told you have 10 years to live. There's something about that can never be undone. And even though, 6 months to a year later, they're like, Nate, we're sorry. or realistically, it was Mr. Green. We're sorry, we misdiagnosed. You don't have this degenerative issue. We found out that you just basically had this other issue over here, and your brain and your heart just stopped working together. But luckily, it's neurological, so hopefully it will repair over time. So when you hear that, you can't unhear that. And so there's something about those moments, that time frame, that when I decided to launch business, and it was actually in the struggles of launching a business, almost having to file for bankruptcy, walking through getting a job offer that would solve all my problems. And it was in that moment when I had to make that real decision of who is going to show up. Is it Nate? Or is it Nate Green, the juggernaut? Like, who is going to arrive in this moment? And in that moment, when I made that decision to click and to dig harder and deeper into business, that's when the juggernaut showed up. And that's when it has been nothing but just constant forward progression. It has been that unstoppable grit. It doesn't matter what comes. I'm going to take it on the chin. I'm going to chase it down, and nothing is going to stop me. And
It,
that's where it's pretty crazy, man.
yeah, if we were to drill down to the decision that you made or what led to that decision, in your book, you say that change is inevitable, growth is optional,
Mm.
right? And you obviously have chosen over and over again to grow. But so many of us, when we are faced with obstacles in front of us that seem insurmountable, we don't. We don't choose that option. We choose the I don't know what I'm going to do, or how am I going to deal with this, or my life as I know it is over. I'm never going to be able to succeed or achieve my goals, and then we kind of just quit. So what was it for you that didn't allow you to go with the latter, that channeled you to go into the growth mindset and basically the dominate mindset?
Keyword in there is Nate at the end. If you didn't catch that, it's dominate. Like I'm in there.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Okay. Great.
So, Ian, that is a killer question, and I love it because it really helps me connect back to those moments. And it was really hard writing the book. Just being honest with you, is because I had to pull out some of these hard moments when I write the stories. I had to connect back, and a part of writing the book, I had to be dedicated to be open and vulnerable. Those
Yeah.
are two key elements, and the part of the impact that I want to have requires me to be open and vulnerable. And so, in that, it was literally in those moments, the painstaking reality of the divide. You have option A and you have option B.
Hmm.
And once you make that, in order to commit, you have to do a lot of soul searching. And like we've talked about before, me and you, it comes down to the core of who you are. What are you built for? Then what is fueling you? What is that drive and ambition? It has to go beyond just you. And then what is the lighthouse? What are the goals that you are setting in place with these other two at your fingertips? Once you connect down to those and you add all those together, you realize there is one missing element, and that is the multiplier. And I call that focus action. And when you talk about that, in every moment that you're in, there's always a desired outcome to every circumstance. And you got to figure out the why behind that desired outcome. And as you dial these things in, then next thing you know, you can create the focused action. And so in those moments, I dug deep, I dug hard. I looked at the people in my life that I wanted to be an example for. I looked at the people in my life that I knew that had gone through hard medical situations. And I
Hmm.
wanted to show them that there is hope on the other side. There is the ability to overcome on the other side. I
Yeah.
looked at the people that I didn't know that I was still yet to meet that needed me to get outside of my own comfort zone, to get outside of my own box, to be able to take on my own future, to then be able to lead them into their future. And once you start looking at all these pieces, you realize that you have to set goals and you have to have commitment. And you have to have commitment not with other people. Don't worry about everybody else. You have to look at yourself in the mirror every single day. And you got to say, hey, listen, Nate, have you showed up today as the best version of you? Did you make every effort and make every process and get it across the finish line? Did you make the best out of every single moment you had today? And as you sit there every single day and you look at that, and as I was looking at that point in my life, I was looking at back at that short history in business, which is about 6 months. And I was like, did I show up as the best and greatest version of myself in these 6 months? Or was I still licking my wounds from the hardships that I had gone through? And in that moment, I realized that I hadn't showed up as the best version of me. There was still more. And I'm not going to wait till my deathbed to look back at all the regrets of how I didn't show up and how I didn't chase after the things I was hungry and driven and motivated to go after. And in that moment, I had to have a come to Jesus saying, all right, God, which direction do I go? And the only thing I heard back is you go forward as the best version of you. And that was the decision. Take the easy road down over here, take the job that would guarantee 6 figures, give me comfort, help in the short run, or show up in the way that I knew I was built for. And in
Yeah.
turn, in that moment, it was like, let's go. We are going to move forward in a different kind of way. We're going to show up like you've never seen before. We're not going to worry about people around us. We're going to hyper focus on me and only me and what I'm built for, what I'm going to chase after, my goals, my ambitions, and I'm going to go forward how I am built for. And that was the deciding factor.
That's awesome. And it decide is the key word there. You made the decision. And I want to talk about the lighthouse because you talk about that a lot in your book. But before we go to that, I kind of want to reverse engines here. And what would you say to people who are listening to this or watching this and realize, well, this guy had, he had a 6-figure job on the side and he decided to do something else. Like, I don't have that kind of cush. I don't have that kind of set up in my life, and he's been able to do all these things because he had XYZ already established.
Yeah. So the 6-figure was a job offer.
Mm-hmm.
So I had already started the business. I had already been chasing down. So when I got let go from being a police officer, I had nothing. I had $6,000 in the bank. That was it. $6,000.
Yeah.
And it was 6 months into the business that I had this job offer over here for 6 figures, or I was going to continue running the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to make a decision. And in those moments, whether you have an option for a 6-figure outcome over here, it doesn't matter. What comes down is the core of you. You got to figure out what you are built for. And it might be that job opportunity. And if you're looking for the 6-figure offer, have you done what it takes to become a 6-figure employee? Have you done what it takes to become worth 6 figures? Whether it is in a business or it's a job, it doesn't matter what you're chasing. You have to be the person that is worth that. You have to grow, build, develop, constantly chase with resilience, going after your knowledge base, your growth. And whether it's building a business that makes you worth 6 figures on your annual salary, whether it's over here, and listen, let's be real, 6 figures, that's not where your goals stop. You should be setting goals way beyond that. And that's really where, in those moments, whether you have a cush or whether you don't have a cush, it's up to you how you show up, whether you have it or not.
Yes, and that is key. And that's kind of what I wanted to dig into. And you said it perfectly when you said, it doesn't matter if you have the 6-figure job over here or not. It's really figuring out what you're built for. And that's what you talk about in the book, what you're built for, because you talk about people who have chased success in the wrong direction. And in the eyes of a lot of people would think that individual is very successful. But at the end of the day, since they did not chase the things that they should have been chasing, in the end, their success didn't last. But that's why it's important to figure out what your lighthouse is. So can you tell us, what is the lighthouse that you reference so much in your book?
So to take it a step back about the lighthouse, what in the early days, what I thought maybe were some of my goals, as I continued on, they continued to expand. And so when we talked about the core, we've talked about the fuel a little bit, talking about those things deep inside of you that keep you driven and motivated. The lighthouse is the output, is what are the outcomes that you're going after? And it can't just be short run. It can't be like, oh yeah, I want to make sure that I can pay my family's mortgage for the next year, or I want 6 months worth of savings. Those are great blocks of your lighthouse, maybe pieces of your lighthouse. but it is not the extent of your lighthouse. So the goal is when we talk about the core of who you are, one thing I like to do is as people understand their skill sets, their abilities, their capabilities, their different breakdown of who they are and their personalities and the cognitive, all these pieces as they come together, I like to do an exercise after discovery called display. So display is like a trophy. You put it into a cabinet so you can shine a light on it and basically illuminate it so that you can see its greatness, right?
Yep.
So then the same way would be me and you.
Hmm.
As you're talking about identifying these different skill sets, these capabilities, and as you look at it all from a realistic perspective, don't think about like, what can I do? Look at all these things, lay them all out, literally print it. I don't care. Put it all on paper and just identify skill sets, abilities, all your different aspects of who you are. And then what you have to do is you have to look at it from a displayed perspective. What can all this create? If all these things are skills and abilities, what can it become? What are the things it can achieve? And then why would it want to achieve that? That's where you tie in your fuel. And as you look at this display about this person and all the capabilities that is be able to achieve, you connect it back to you. You're like, wait a second, this is me. So why am I settling for the simple paths when I have all these skill sets that can become something greater on display? Once you illuminate and you focus on it, what are the things that with these skill sets, what is the greatest version of what I can become? That's where the top of your lighthouse comes, is from your fuel, your core, and your complete capabilities of what you are built. Sometimes there's these calling inside of us that we're like, hey, listen, God's calling us, or we feel this calling to go further and to build and to become and to impact, whatever the case may be. As you're building your lighthouse, there's different bricks, and those different bricks can be from different areas of our lives. Maybe it's from a hardship you had growing up. You might be passionate about helping a people group, people with disabilities, whatever the
Hmm.
case may be. It might be entrepreneurs. It might be those hungry, driven, motivated people that are running back and forth like a pinball, going crazy, and they just need a little bit more direction. And so the different ways of how you want to show up, that's the lighthouse. And it needs to be serious. It needs to be built with proper foundation everywhere from short term goals all the way to what I call deathbed goals. Deathbed goals are when you're on your deathbed, you look back at your life. And what are the regrets that you might have if you don't make a difference and you don't make a change and you don't set different goals? Those are your deathbed goals. And so when you're talking about your lighthouse, it better run you all the way out to your deathbed.
So this is really not only your goals, but also your future self and how you want to basically live the rest of your life.
100%.
And you talk about some of the things that hinder you potentially building your lighthouse in terms of four major lenses or
Mm.
holdbacks. And you talk about their you, money and success, your future, and your grind. Can you kind of unpack that for us and explain those?
So yeah, the lens issues are one of my favorite things. I actually just had a conversation this morning with an entrepreneur, and he was always having trouble making decisions, like always second guessing them. And he's like, I just wonder what they will say. And I'm like, who is they that you keep on talking about?
Right.
And he's like, um, you know, people. And I'm like, who? And he was struggling identifying that. So he has major cracked lenses. He's always second guessing his own decisions because he's worried about this global they, whether it be your parents, your siblings, other entrepreneurs, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
When you go through life, naturally, if you have this lens and that's the vision of who you are, there's things that are going to come up. People are going to run up and whack it with a hammer, whether it's awful things people said, whether it's being made fun of for your weight, whether there's hardships that you go through, whether you're like, man, like, listen, like I failed here and you don't want to find yourself back in that same position. And some of it can even come from great places in people's hearts. Our parents, they want to keep us secure. They want to keep us from making mistakes. And so what
Right.
do? They guide us with their opinions. And
Yeah.
sometimes their opinion's great for them based upon their life, but why are they putting that on me? I go over in the book about my dad. Like my dad, when I told him I was launching a business, he said, hey, Nate, are you sure? I think maybe you should look for a job that has a pension or retirement program.
Right. Which came out of love, and he wants to protect you.
100%.
Yeah.
And I love my dad for it. And even I used that later on to make sure that I was putting money away for retirements, etc. But if I'd only listened to that moment, that in time, and I didn't have the confidence of who I was or what I was chasing after and what I was built to be, if I didn't have all that, then I could have, that one moment could have adjusted my lens enough to say, you know what, I'm just going to get a job. I'm not going to run business. Very simple. And so cracked lenses, that's like one of my favorite things to work down into with people is because we all have them. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
not even a crack. Sometimes it's a formation. Sometimes we're looking at ourselves from a different perspective. And I'll be honest with you, I still deal with a lot of this, but I'm aware of it. So in every decision I make, I have to realize that there's these cracks that can form from childhood or from different aspects of my life that I have to be very careful to make sure that I'm making decisions after I've patched those little cracks up, to make sure that I'm like looking at myself through the clear lens, not the cracked or fractured lens. And
Right.
sometimes, let's be real, some of us have gotten completely smashed lenses. Certain times in our lives that we've tried to pick ourselves up and piece ourselves back together. And that's really where that lens or that perspective, and whether that is of you or whether that's of money and success, where there's a lot of people that look at it, there's people that come from households that because of insecurities, the parents are like, listen, son, you never have to be wealthy. You only need enough money for this week. That's a mindset.
Yep.
Okay, well, that can create a massive issue. Actually, I've had a client that his parents told him that exact thing. And so it didn't matter whether he was making 300,000, 200,000, 100,000, or even 600,000. He was burning all the money to the ground. He never had savings. So in there, his lens was fractured by a simple comment out of insecurities that was ingrained into him
Hmm.
by passive comments
Yeah.
that his parents were putting out there. And so all of our lens really need to have a look. And that comes down to success, that comes down to money. What I love about the grind is the grind right there. It's so many people look at the grind as a negative thing. And I talk about it in the book, espresso, one of my favorite things in this entire world. I mean, I would give up so many foods just to be able to keep my espresso. But in there, the first thing you have to do is grind it. You have to take it from a bean and you have to turn it into ground so that you can create your espresso. I know there's a lot of process before that, but in that situation, the grind is
Hmm.
a killer thing. It is amazing. It is just something that can take something good and make it great. So, as you identify these different things, how do you become great? You have to set your mind to constantly move forward in every area, perfecting your skill sets, building and developing and always growing. That is the grind. That is the perfection. That is the constant development of who you are. And in it, you have to have the right mindset to be willing to do the work, to be willing to go after your future, to be willing to go after your success and taking the actions required. That's not something bad. That is something incredible.
Agreed. And I think that a lot of people, you're right, have that negative connotation of the grind, but it is all a part of something else that you say in your book in terms of, a part of what you're preparing for in your future can only be achieved through the struggles and hardships that you are called to face now.
Mm.
And it's that choice to understand that the obstacles that you have to go through, the hurdles that you have to jump, the hoops that you have to go through, the hardships that you have to deal with are the grind. And they're preparing you, as you say, to go from good to great. They're preparing you to have the tools that you need to be able to step into the next best version of yourself. If you choose to use them to make you powerful and not powerless.
Mm.
And as you said, that's a mindset. That is a mindset.
And it's something you have to constantly remind yourself of. Like, and that's where, like we've talked about, that fuel. That fuel is so important. That is your why. In that why that you find deep inside of you, that sometimes helps you get the right vantage point. And that's where like life
Mhm.
is going to come. Life is gonna happen. And you can't be like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm just gonna do so much good that nothing, come on. It's going to happen. And what it looks like is gonna be different to you versus me versus other people. And you know what? In there, the vantage point of how we look at it is so important.
Yeah.
And when you have a purpose, when you have a process, it is amazing to see the outcome. One thing that I tell people is after I've gone through, heart failure, paralysis like you, I've gone through a lot of crazy life transitions, tough relationships, divorce, child abuse with the kids, dealing with all this trauma therapy, PTSD, you name it, and a lot of other things that I haven't even mentioned yet in the book or with you or anybody else, is there's so many pieces that mold us together. And as they mold us together, when you have that core of who you are identified and you have the fuel figured out, that power inside of you, and then you set your lighthouse, then it doesn't matter how you feel. It's all about focus, that focused action. And what happens is through all this, through this equation and having everything dialed in, you find hope because you know that there's a process. You know that there's difficulties. And I've always told God, listen, God, through all this, let it not be in vain. Let me do something with it.
Mm-hmm.
And God always comes back to me a little sarcastic because that's how I am. And he's like, Nate, listen, it's up to you what you do with it.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, God. Then my prayer changes. God, open the door for opportunities for me to use all of this disaster that has gone on. And I want to give people hope. I want to give people the ability to overcome from an understanding of who they are, what they're built for, what is fueling them, and
Mm-hmm.
set goals based upon these elements, and then take focused action no matter how you feel every day. Show up, make it better. Show up, make it better. The grind, constantly showing up, because showing up is the first step. Taking action is the most important step.
Agreed. Absolutely. And I want to read a part of your book. It's from the beginning. It hit me. Page 4 of your book, Life is a Journey. And I love this. It says, life is all about the journey, learning, growing, and developing as we get through each situation that we're challenged with. Hardships and obstacles are all a required part of this journey, and there's absolutely no escaping them. However, you do get to make daily choices on how you will handle yourself through all the challenges and hardships you're faced with. And I love that because that is so dead on and right and correct. But the part that I love about it the most is you get to make daily choices on how you will handle yourself. And I think that's key. And I think that's what people don't understand about the grind is that it is every day. Like the grind doesn't take a day off. Like your journey to get to the best version of yourself doesn't rest. It's time is going to pass regardless. Is what we choose to do with that time. And I think, and I read this, I was like, man, it hit me like, yes, I know that it's my choice. And when I wake up in the morning, I have a choice today. Is it going to be a great day or is it going to be a bad day? It's up to me. But to understand that there has to be the mindset that it is going to be every day that you have to make the choice to win
100%.
every day. Like that, you can't take any days off with that because if you do,
Nope.
then you lose ground.
Man, I tell you what, it is insane. And being open, like I was on a trip recently and I was sick as a dog. And there was a moment when I was sick, I was down. The family was off having fun where we were at. I was stuck in a room. And during those days, that people always say, hey, don't make decisions when you're hungry, when you're tired, or when you're really upset. Also, when you're sick and when you're down, not the time for decisions. That's where your decisions have to be more decided on this factual core fuel lighthouse basis. And then during those days, that day was not a day to plan. That day was not a day to make decisions. That day was to hold on tight and figure out what needle I could move forward just a little bit. Sometimes during those points where you are down, you're not feeling 100%, whether it's psychological or physical, you can't really be your best self, but you can still be moving forward. And you got to look down and you got to figure out, hey, listen, what can I inch forward today? It's
Right.
not about the speed, it's about the direction.
Yes.
And so it's how can I just push one small thing forward and just keep on moving as you're adapting versus letting yourself fall backwards into your suck. You got to figure out that future. You got to chase after and constantly move that needle forward, even if it's slow progress.
Yeah. Let's talk about the suck. Obviously, the book title is Suck Less, Do Better. And you talk about the suck in the book. What is it? What's the suck that we all deal
Mm.
with?
So I like to think of the suck, and I define the suck as basically you finding yourself in any other way than what you are built for and the greatest outcome of what you can be. And
Mhm.
so the suck is allowing the comfort to settle in. The suck is allowing the easy roads to be the ones you travel. Everybody's suck is defined different. That's where in
Yeah.
the book we have an entire chapter based upon that in itself. You have to define what does the suck look like for you? Because to me, my suck is allowing any day to pass without pushing myself forward just a little bit in the appropriate direction.
Right.
To other people, they might be like, yeah, listen, like I'm okay with just maybe not having momentum over the weekends. That might not be the suck for them. Everybody's suck is personal. It is them. They have to define it, but you have to uncover it. And you have to realize what are the things or what are the actions that are shifting you back towards your suck versus chasing after your lighthouse. And sometimes it's fears, sometimes it's insecurities, letting them be your decision
Yes.
makers.
Yes.
Those things are key. And once you identify, hey, listen, if I'm living in fear, it's not moving me towards my lighthouse. If I'm letting insecurities get in my way, it's not moving the needle forward. So the suck is letting fears win, letting insecurities win, going backwards into comfort. Whatever the case may be, there's so many different ways you can define that. And that's where in the book, an entire chapter is set to really break down examples and ideas and concepts because it's not the same for everyone. Some people's success to them, their definition of success might be my definition of the suck. And so when you look at that,
Right.
you have to define it for yourself and figure out what does that look like for you.
And and maybe there isn't, but you work with entrepreneurs and you coach entrepreneurs. Is there a defining suck for most people that you work with? I mean, you just said it's different for everybody. Um, I just feel like fear is a main underwriter for most people. Takes a lot of different shapes,
100%.
but yeah.
Yeah, fears, insecurities are major holdbacks. And I tell you what, allowing those to be your decision maker or to shift your decision, I would say that is a constant theme. And then coupled with the lens issues, like we talked about, those
Mhm.
three things are core fundamentals of what have people falling into their suck versus chasing after their forever. And give you an example, when people find themselves like stuck in the suck, one of those things are like when their parents have told them they should chase a job or a career. Like if I took some advice that I was given, if I chased a job with a pension or retirement, I would have found myself in the suck at some point.
Yeah.
At some point, I would be sitting there and be like, this is not all I have. Why did I do this? I am in the suck. And that's where people might not know it as a suck, but that's where you have people that are doctors, you have people that are lawyers, people that are real estate investors, you name it, across the board, even entrepreneurs chasing the wrong industry that doesn't require the greatest version of them to show up. They find themselves in the suck. And it's because they've settled based and they've not chased after things despite their fears and insecurities. They have let their lens issues direct their path versus really understanding who they are and what they're built for. There's so many ways, but yeah, I mean, fear is such a crippler, and so many people will cower and just fall backwards instead of overcome it.
And then they never realize their full potential
Exactly.
or even tap into it. And that's something that is I really love about this book is it helps you do that. Like it helps you pull back your fears. It helps you pull back your insecurities and it makes you look at yourself in the mirror. And once you do that, once you really do that, like you can't escape that. Like this, it's just you and you. And you start to put together the work that you have, the worksheets, and you start to formulate and build your lighthouse, and you start to identify the lenses and the cracks that you have in them, and you start to do the work to repair those lenses and repair yourself. You're really setting yourself up for success. So you can tap into that full potential. And I feel that so many people don't realize that there are ways to get to where they want to be, realizing it's not going to be easy. Like it's going to be a journey. It's going to suck, and you're going to have to embrace the suck, right, to be able to get through it. But I think, the more that people understand that there are tools and techniques and ways that they can, the way I think about it is like they take the blue or the red pill in the matrix, and they can wake up and there's another world out there that they didn't know was possible.
100%.
But they have to take the steps. They have to be on the journey that, like you said, it's the hard. You have to make the choice to go the hard route and not stay in the comfort zone, which oddly enough isn't so comfortable, but a lot of people choose to stay there anyway, right?
100%. Yeah. And you hit it on the nail on the head. It's incredible because as I was writing this book, I reverse engineered my journey. Basically, walked back through the holdbacks and was open about those, and basically figured out what I had to do to overcome them. I was
Mhm.
actually going back as I was writing the book. I was going back and writing it to the 23-year-old version of Nate for certain aspects, to the 27-year-old version of Nate, to the 30-year-old version of Nate when I hit different roadblocks. To walk back and basically diagnose my entire journey and say, hey, listen, what did I need if I could have back at the beginning when I was 23, when I was starting to plan for launching my first business? What did I need then that would have fast tracked what took 16 years or 15 years to accomplish? How could I have done it in 5? How could I have done it in a shorter period of time? How could I have identified how to show up as the best version of me earlier on in my life? And that's what the entire book is about, is the fast track. It's all about laying out the journey, laying out the process so that people can uncover what took me so many years to uncover through trips and falls, smashes on my face, you name it. But
Yeah,
how do people find success faster?
right. And speaking of which, for those of our listeners and our viewers who don't know, what was your first business? And then what was the business that you sold for 8 figures? And what are the businesses that you're running now?
So the first business, as I was understanding who I was and what I was built for, I realized that the way that my brain was working, I was very mathematically minded, and so I decided in there that I needed to do something along those lines. With my personality, when I was discovering all that as a cop, the first thing that always popped up is sales. They're like, you should do sales. You should do sales. You should do sales. And I'm like, I don't want to do sales. Like I know I'm built for more than that. And so a part of the process is to really uncover who you are and then identify what does that look like on display, like we talked about. And as I was
Mhm.
doing this when I was a cop, I was understanding that, wait a second, these financial industries seemed really interesting. How do I take my drive, my ambition, all these things and push forward into the financial industry and do it a little bit different? And so I set out to launch an accounting firm, a wealth management firm, and other financial firms. And so the first one was an accounting firm. That was the flagship. That's the one that built and went and chased after so much drive and ambition. And so my goal inside that was people first, money will come, which is funny for a financial firm to be focused more on people than money itself. And so
Yeah.
I built a relationship based accounting firm and built that to scale, constantly grew it, developed it. We actually were on the Inc. 5000 for 4 years in a row. 2024, funny enough, is
That's
the
amazing.
final year, is the fourth year, based upon the 2023 financials. And so then I just actually sold that in May of this year. So that was the final exodus. And so building it, scaling it, and then selling it with some additional firms alongside of it, having a mortgage firm, having a wealth management firm, and then having a consulting firm. And so my activity alone, I don't do anything aside the financial firms anymore, except for talk to people occasionally. But my bread and butter is coaching, consulting, speaking, and writing books.
Awesome. Such as the number one bestseller, Suck Less, Do Better.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. It's, again, reading this book, as we talked about a little before we hopped on and started recording, so many lessons in here, not just about business and entrepreneurship, but also just about life. Like, there are some things in here that made me reflect on some of my past relationships, my first marriage, and realizing, the areas that I sucked and that really affected the relationship. Not to go too deep into that, but there was a lot of areas where the suck wasn't my fault. And I dealt with the suck, but there are so many little like pearls of wisdom in here that you have in here, Nate, from your own experience that people can pull out and really apply to their own life, and then use the tactics and the tips that you have in here to really start to see some success and like you said, move that needle forward. Sometimes it's in big great chunks, and sometimes it's a inch at a time, right?
Exactly. You got to make sure you're constantly moving forward.
For sure. Nate, this has been awesome talking with you. Like I said, I could, you know, unpack this book with you all day. I would love to do that and pick your mind about it more. But for our listeners and our viewers, where is the best place to find out more about Nate Green, the Juggernaut?
Oh man, I think the best place is to go to successwithnategreen.com or find me on Instagram at I am Nate Green. Those are the best places to harass me and to chase me down, but also to get more information about the book and even the updates on some of the keynotes and the different aspects that we're chasing after as we move forward.
Awesome. Well, Nate, I have to ask, if you were to give one piece of advice to help someone to move forward with the positive persistence that you have exhibited throughout your life, where's the best place to start for someone who's listening, who's in that spot, that hard spot between the proverbial rock and a hard place? They don't know, like, man, what's the next thing? What's the action I can start to take to move forward? What would you say to that person?
You have to dig deep to who you are and what you're built for. It doesn't matter what else that you go after. Until you really know you, nothing else will actually achieve the greatest version of you or your greatest success because it's always going to be based upon you.
There you have it. Well said, sir. Well said. Nate, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
I appreciate you inviting me. This has been awesome.
I want to thank all of our viewers and all of our listeners for tuning into this episode. Remember, if you like what you've heard today, make sure you subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and make sure that you tune in to all of our socials to check what is next coming your way from Positive Persistence. And like we always say, remember, stay positive, stay persistent, and know that mindset is everything. And we'll see you next time.